So bear with me, I have my laser running in the background, but hopefully this video will help you out. So I know you mentioned you're stuck on removing the background and what we need to adjust on the image. So there's a couple different methods that you can do, of course. I'm going to show you the one using the software that I worked on with you. So first thing I am going to direct you to is this right here, Adobe Firefly. It used to be Adobe Express. I will give you the link for this, but it is a free background remover. I really like this because it is good for pretty much many different type of file types, large types of files, and it does a transparent background, which is very important for what we do. So first thing we're going to do is just go to upload your photo right here. And I've got some photos that I'm going to pull. Here we go. And it's going to go ahead and get this processed for us. It doesn't take too terribly long, and it does simplify the process that we would typically use. So we're going to go ahead and let that load. And as you can see, it did a pretty good job. Now, the only issue that I sometimes have is hair, but you can even see it did a really great job with even the flyaways. So this is a really good starting point. Now what I want to do here is I'm going to go ahead and just hit download, and that's going to allow me to put that onto the computer. There you go. All right, so again, that's your first step. Use that as your background removing. So now the next thing we want to do is get this image prepped in Corel Photopaint. So we're going to go ahead and minimize Corel Photopaint. And I might be a little bit slower just because my arm is in its sling, so I'm using my other arm right now. All right, so from here, what we're going to go ahead and do is, of course, name our document. We're going to just follow this one. Right. And then background color. So for you, you're going to be working on wood. So wood, we do not want a black background. We want a white background. So I'm going to click on this guy here. Click on white, and we do want to make sure that we're using white, not any percent of black. That way we don't have anything in the background engraved. So it's to be kind of like a placeholder, not an actual feature to engrave. All right, of course, dimensions, I'm going to recommend for you, don't do the dimensions of your cutting board, but do the dimensions of how big you want your image to be. So just think about how big your cutting board is, of course, just for relativity, but so at this point, we're going to go ahead and make sure that our DPI is at 200, and then we'll hit OK. All right, so from here, we're going to go ahead and bring in our image. We'll always import. Grab that. I may have already gone through this process, but it didn't save, so bear with me. All right, so here's the file that I have here. We're going to import. We're going to click and let go, and that's going to give us our photograph here. So I'm simply going to do this in a couple different stages. So my first stage is going to be just the basics. Get the color out, fix the lighting. From there, we'll move on to things that I think will really help an image out to make sure the details have more contrast and are a little bit more visible. And then from there is a little trick that I do to kind of reinforce edges of the image that might be almost not that terribly dark or light, depending on your material color, and the contrast isn't there. So therefore, a little border around the body of the image can give it the illusion that it's still there. And that's less work on your end. So once we get through that, we'll go ahead and process through Photograv. We'll, again, treat that like a pit stop. And from there, I will show you something to look out for in LightBurn. All right, so I've got my photo here. We're going to go ahead and just place it. And little tip here is if your image is too small, unfortunately, it maybe only can make it about an inch or two bigger. Otherwise, you're basically zooming in and you're going to see pixels. You can always make something smaller. That's completely fine, but just keep that in mind. Larger isn't always the best option. So we have this image. Again, we're going to do the basics first. I'm going to go to adjust here and we're going to locate either desaturate or auto desaturate. Click. There we go. Color's gone. All right. When you take the color out, you may notice that some things are almost the same color. So it's very good for us to also adjust the lighting because that can really help with the illusion of those details. So back under adjust, we're going to go and find tone curve. Regular tone curve, not auto. My box populates here. Yours might be populating over there. Regardless, there is this line here. We're going to click on it and just start dragging it around. Move it around, see what it does. Obviously, we don't want too bright. Don't want too dark. So, again, this is kind of where we're starting here. And it doesn't need a ton, but I'd like to get a little bit brighter. But also, by going down a little bit, I can keep the integrity of some of the dark colors. So a little bit brighter, a little bit darker at the same time. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Again, if you have your box over here, it doesn't matter. All right, so at this stage, what we're going to go ahead and do is work on some of those little things to make the details pop. And my magic is going to be using the Dodge Burn tool. Now, Dodge and Burn is underneath the Effect tool, and Corel looks like a little Q-tip. And to pick which particular effect you want to use, you have to click on the drop down and find one. Dodge Burn. And we're going to start with burning midtones. Think of this like makeup almost. You're going to darken up an area with bronzer. You're going to lighten up an area, which that's what Dodge is, like highlighter. So we're all about contour and highlight here, just to get you a little bit more oomph. So we're going to start with burn midtones. And I like the midtones just because I find that they're a little bit easier to work with. We're going to pick a shape up here. And I'm going to recommend this guy. Now, a lot of times it's going to populate like this, and you're like, where is that? That's not right in that corner. Look for this one. It's to the left, or excuse me, to the right of the slash and above the X. All right, there we go. And if that icon doesn't change, keep going. Do it again. I don't know why it does that, but sometimes it does. All right, we're going to go ahead and start with facial features first. Eyes, nose, and mouth. Those are going to be the most important features, and then the rest is like transitions from skin to hair, neck to chin, clothing to shoulders, things like that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and make this brush a bit small. I'm going to go down to about a 10, a little smaller than that, let's do about an 8. All right, and then what I'm going to do here is just go over some of these shadows that already are there, making those darker. That's just one pass. I'll undo it. But again, all we're here for is really heightening up that contrast. Again, it kind of feels like makeup. Go along where the eye, the creases. Go along the waterline, the lash line. Darken those up. You can even get a smaller brush and start working on those lashes if you really felt like it. I'm going to go around the eye here, the iris, just kind of darken up and reinforce those edges. And we're going to repeat that process over here around the lash line, the waterline, darkening those up. You can, again, do lashes if you want to. And then we're going to go around the iris here. Right there, reinforcing it. All right, so another trick of mine is going to be making this about the size of the pupil, going over the pupil where I think it is, and giving it a bunch of clicks. What we're trying to do here is really reinforce the contrast, rebuild some of those features. This can be something that can really help a photo that maybe the light just was super bright in that area. Again, all about reinforcing. So now we have these piercing eyes to give us a little bit of something else. All right, so eyes are good. Now we're going to talk about nose. Noses reflect light like crazy. They're just the oiliest part of somebody's body. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go around where I think her nose is. You can, of course, have the photo open. That way you can make sure you're actually doing that in the right areas. Or if you know the person, of course, you can go by memory. I usually have my photo open and give it a little gander before I start doing anything too crazy. And we're going around where the shadows would be, nostrils, really reinforcing that. And at the end of the day, my biggest trick here is doing something called a squint test. That's my own little thing. But basically, if you go to squint your eyeballs while you're looking at this image and the details disappear, those are what you really need to work on. So, squinting, you've got a little bit more nose here, probably do a little bit more here at the bottom, a little bit more underneath here. There you go. All right, now we're moving on to mouth. So I like to make these usually about the same size as the lips. She's a little girl, so nothing too crazy. A little bit there, a little bit around the teeth line, gums. We want to avoid having this mouth feel like it's just a white band. And so I'm kind of going around and deepening the shadows. You can go in between the teeth and add a little bit of shadow there. Kind of best you can. Sometimes it's hard to tell. This is a kiddo, so some of those teeth are a little funky right now. So from there, with a little bit of shadows, you can make the brush again small or as big as you need to be to get that job done. That's typically what I would do. All right, so we've gone ahead and reinforced eyes, nose, and mouth. Now we're going to talk about the rest of the photo. So I mentioned transitions, so we're going to go ahead and just make this brush a little bit bigger. Transitions are going to be like hairline to forehead. Some people who have a hair color that's very similar to their skin tone, or at least reflects the light, sometimes can look like they're bald. So I will take this and usually kind of line around the edge, just reinforcing. Again, she's got dark hair, so really doesn't matter in this case, but sometimes you want to do that. Follow along. From there, it's also like chin to neck. It can disappear. So what we're going to do here, just to reinforce it, I'm going to go right along where I think her chin line is. There you go. We had a little extra shadow there. And then from there, we're also going to look at clothing. So sometimes clothing can be, again, very similar in color when you take the color out. And so we might have to drag this along the edge of the clothing or above the edge if that means reinforcing like what you think would be a shadow. So you can go into the textures of clothing as well, just a couple clicks and drags. And again, because we're using such a subtle brush, nobody's looking at these brush strokes. Nobody can see that. So all right. One last little tidbit that I sometimes do with hair. She's got plenty of texture, but sometimes that's not always the case. So I'll make my brush pretty small and I'll go in and I'll just darken up and follow the way the hair falls. So if she's got a swoop down here, I'll swoop too. Swoop. Now, sometimes it might be too much like that one. We'll back up. But that can really reinforce textures, especially if, again, you don't have a whole lot happening here. Now, from there, we're going to go ahead and work on the lightening process. So again, the opposite. We just darkened up some of those shadows. Now we're going to brighten up some of those highlights. So back underneath Dodge and Burn, I'm going to click on the drop down, Dodge Midtones. I'll pick a brush. Again, if this icon doesn't match what you picked, it's probably not the one. All right, so we're going to start with the facial features first. We're going to zoom in here. And we're going to brighten and lighten parts of the face. So in this case, I go right where the whites of the eyes are and brighten that up. And sometimes I go around the pupil. Again, reinforcing that. I'll go above, below, or in between where I darken things up. This is just about, again, really reinforcing those details. I'll put underneath. We'll do the same thing over here, but look how bright this eye is looking in comparison. We're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to start with the whites of the eyes. There is a little piece of hair here. You can either choose to remove it or leave it. I like to leave things in their natural state unless stated by the customer. A little bit brighter around the pupil. And then again, above, below, and in between where we already added those shadows in. There you go. All right, so bright. All right, now moving on, we're going to go ahead and work through the rest of the facial features. Everything goes and gets reinforced after you did the burn. So we're going to go ahead and grab a brush here. I'm just going to go right along the very top of her nose, a little bit over here, a little bit underneath. And then for the mouth, I'm just going to go right along. Nope, that's getting rid of that shadow. So we're not going to do that. We're going to make this a little bit smaller. I'll do a little bit here, just a little bit, just to add a little extra highlight. You can also sometimes go above the lips, but be careful, that can give somebody a milk stash. So, all right, for the teeth, we're going to go ahead and make this brush smaller, about the size of the teeth, or where I can easily work in. And I'm just clicking and dragging and holding it down just to try to get that to pop a bit more. There you go, like so. Teeth turn into kind of like a band, so it helps with that. All right, so we now have a lot of pop details. So from this point, it's the same idea. Again, transitions are going to be the next thing we want to focus on if that's what we need to. Maybe highlighting some of the peaks where we already darkened up those shadows over there. Again, around, above, below, all the shadows that we reinforced. I am going to make this brush pretty big. We're going to go to about a 20. Nope, we're going to go about a 30. And I'm going to go try and see if I can go above where I added that shadow. That just looks like she's got a 5 o'clock shadow. So we're not going to do that. In some cases, I can make this brush bigger, and that might help just because, again, we have a really soft outer edge of the brush that I picked. So something like that would be acceptable. From here, again, hair. We can also do hair by bringing this down to a 10. And the idea, again, is you kind of follow the way the hair is sitting, reinforcing all those textures back in. So something to consider. Ultimately, again, this is just optional, but can really make or break an image. So it's an option. You can see I've added some texture back over here. All right, so our girly is looking great. We're going to go ahead and hit the save button here just because you should be doing that in between all the stuff. We're going to go ahead. There we go. All right, so my next little trick here, and it's not always something you need to use, but it's the drop shadow trick. All right, take this and we click and drag. Don't drag it till it moves. We don't want that. We want it to stay right underneath because it's meant to be a shadow behind our person. Now, a couple tricky things. This program loves to make that shadow go inside the image. And while we can see a bit of that over on the hair side, that is something that we don't really see anywhere else. So we're going to kind of look at things. One, make sure it's the correct color. Either for the opposite or whatever is going to give you that nice crispy edge that you're needing. Again, we're trying to give it the illusion of the shape, so therefore we don't lose what's happening. So you can pick a white if it's a black background typically, and right now we're on black because it's a white background. And I mentioned the direction is always going to default to the inside, so just make sure to click on the feathering direction and switch this to side. And we can very clearly see there's definitely something going on here. And don't be alarmed if you feel like some of these flyaways are too much. You can always erase it. But a couple things you can do. There is ways to adjust what's happening. So the first one is feather, which is just how far that it basically stretches. So is it going to be pretty wide or pretty tight to the edge? And I'm going to really recommend tight to the edge. You do not need this to be like a violent, aggressive line. Next one is how dark it is. Bottom is the darkest it'll get. Oops, I touched that. So again, bottom will be the darkest that'll get. Top will be the lightest. I typically go for like pretty either about middle or higher because I find that if it's just too intense, it's going to look obvious. Again, we're really just trying to add a little bit more structure to the image so we don't lose it. So slide these up and down until you like what you like, but again, tight to the edge and not as intense is typically the way to go. All right, so from this stage, that's all I really wanted to show you in here. Those are all the things that I do to an image on a regular basis. From here, we're going to go ahead and export it. So File, Export, and then we're going to go ahead, hit Export, and let's see here. I'm going to call this one Test 2. Here we go. Save flattened always. Always save flattened. You need to make sure you do that because otherwise sometimes it's not going to give you what you want. So save flattened, that way it compresses everything in the file, and then we'll close because Corel likes to crash. So at this point, we're going to go to Photograv. We're going to click on that. In this program, you really need to make sure you are doing a pit stop. Also, please make sure you have the correct machine set up for it. If we look down here at the bottom, mine says that I have my 2816 set up. Now, is there going to be that much of a difference if you're picking different size lasers? Yes and no. If it's within the AP family, you'll probably be fine. However, different machines have different types of laser outputs, different dot sizes. So it's really important that it's set up for your laser. If you're not sure if that is the way it is, even though you may not see that, then you just need to go to Session and then Select Machine. There's going to be options. Again, make sure you're picking the one that's for you. If it's within the family of the lasers that you purchased from, it's probably okay, potentially, unless it's a different type of laser. There's so many things out there. There's CO2, there's diodes, there's fiber. So yes, just make sure you have the correct machine selected. All right, so for this program, we're basically going to start from Open Image and then click until we get to saving. I try to basically not do much in here. It should be just a give it the photo. We'll open. Tell it what material we want it to be on. Okay. And then if you do need to resize it, this might be the place to do it. So if your photo was originally like about where it was before, like 4 inches or smaller, and you needed to resize, maybe work with the image at the size it was in Corel, and then bring it in here and change the size. Resize image is really easy. It's going to resample your image and kind of try to help cushion it. Keep in mind, if your photo is a teeny tiny little image or really bad quality, there is really only so much you can do with it. So close that. Interactive mode is the next big button. I know it's got all these things happening here. One thing that I want you to make sure, if you did not change the machine, just make sure that the machine DPI is set to what we've been using, which is 200. It has to be the same or you will get a warning message. All right, so at this stage, we're going to hit Final Process just to preview what this looks like. All right, there you go. And typically what I do is I will look at this, and if you go, you know what, that's not the right material, that's not what I'm working with, go back to Select Material and try it again. That's completely fine. Open, interactive mode, final process. Okay, well, that didn't do anything. There we go, try it again. So as you can see, again, this is important because if your material texture that you're seeing in the simulation, the color that you're seeing in the simulation is not similar to what you're working with, pick a different material. And you can keep doing that. It's not going to hurt anything to try different materials to just see what it looks like. So at this stage here, we want to take a peek at what we got going on. Once we feel good about the simulation material, look at the image, zoom in, zoom out. We are looking at those details. Are we losing things? Do they need to be reinforced? I'm very glad that we worked on the nose. As we can see, we have a nose. We probably wouldn't. When you're working with dodge and burn, it may feel like not a lot is happening, but at the end of the game, as long as you play, you can definitely see it in this part here. So we've got all kinds of details. We can even see pupils. So eyelashes, the gaps between teeth, again, that's all very important. Now, if you're looking at your image and you're like, you know what, I think I need to either erase or something's too light or too dark and you need to go back to dodge and burn, leave this open up the Corel file, and do those things with this open so you can refer to what that's in there. So in here, I may say, you know what, I need to kind of clean up some of these wispies. They're kind of detaching and therefore not really being, wispies. If anything, they're just noise. Whatever you need to do. But at the end of the day, I'm telling you, we're not going to do anything else in here other than just make sure it's the correct material and call it good. So at this stage, again, if it's good, final process and save. Engraved is going to be the engraving file that you will need to use. It will add ENGR to the end of your title, so you know that's the one. Anytime you use anything else, the only time I use anything else is maybe simulated. In fact, the thumbnail of the video here is actually from the simulated. It just creates a little PNG, I believe it is. Or it might be another BMP, but regardless, it's what we're seeing on the screen right now. So I only use that to give proofs to customers or, of course, write thumbnails. But otherwise, Engraved needs to be selected. I'll hit OK. And then again, as you can see here, ENGR. So we'll save and call it OK. And then we're done. We close this program out and we go to our next one. We try to keep our computer neat and tidy. Don't have excess windows and things open. All right, so we'll update here. I'll go ahead and do that later. We're going to switch this over to the correct device profile. I use a couple different lasers in LightBurn, so I have to make sure it's the correct one. All right, we're going to import this image in, and for the most part, your process for running things is going to be the same as any project. Again, make sure you grab the ENGR, open, and my output is off, so we'll turn that back on. And you may go, oh my gosh, that's just a bunch of dots. That's how that laser engraves. That's what we have to give it. If we were trying to fill everything in, we would end up with a silhouette. So if you see dots, you're good. If you don't see dots, either you may have pulled in the wrong photo or you just didn't do that step yet. All right, so the other thing I want to do here is go into the settings here, double click on my numbers. And while the top might look the same as anything you've done before, speeds and powers, the bottom might be new. Now, LightBurn has a process that Photograv does, but it's all manual. You have to figure out the numbers. It all starts at 0. And that can be a lot of work. You also paid for Photograv if you have it, so you might as well use it. If you do not, that's okay. Go ahead and do that adjust image process, but we're going based on the Photograv method right now. If you're doing Photograv, you have to make sure pass-through is turned on. Don't worry about anything else in this menu, just turn pass-through on or green, and that allows the photo to come into the program and not have LightBurn turn on that other